I never imagined I'd end up being the troublemaker of a neighborhood, but sometimes life pushes you into a corner. My name's Ethan, and after spending 15 years as a structural engineer focusing on residential developments, I thought I had a solid grasp on following the rules. But that all changed when I moved to Sunnyside Estates, the home of Olivia Bennett, the infamous president of the Homeowners Association, who holds the title of the county's most notorious HOA leader. It was there I learned that sometimes following the rules means going head-to-head with the people who claim to enforce them. When I bought my corner lot 18 months ago, the seller casually mentioned that the HOA was a bit picky about appearances. That was like saying the Pacific Ocean is a little wet or Mount Everest is kind of tall. My first real run-in with Olivia happened just 3 days after I moved in. At the time, I was still buried under moving boxes, trying to figure out which circuit breaker controlled the garage when the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent double chime that would soon be the soundtrack to my homeowner nightmares. Standing there in a pristine white pantsuit and a pearl necklace, one that probably cost more than my mortgage, was a woman with the most immovable blonde bob I'd ever laid eyes on. When she tilted her head to size me up, I'm pretty sure her hair was solid enough to be considered a fire hazard from all the hairspray it took to keep it in place. "Hello, I'm Olivia Bennett, president of the Sunnyside Estates HOA," she said, her smile as cold as it was tight. "I just wanted to personally welcome you to our little community." She handed me a 3-ring binder, the gold embossed title Sunnyside Estates, Community Guidelines sparkling in the afternoon light. "All 78 pages are required reading," she continued, "and I suggest you highlight the sections about lawn maintenance and exterior modifications. We've had issues with new homeowners before." When she said issues, it made me picture previous residents trying to turn their front yards into jungles or painting their houses bright neon colors. I thanked her politely, assuming this would be the extent of our interaction. How wrong I was. Later that evening, as I was unpacking my kitchen, I flipped through the handbook. It was ridiculously detailed, outlining everything from the acceptable shades of beige for exterior paint. There were 12 specific shades, each with its own code, to the height limit for garden gnomes, 8 inches, in case you're wondering, and even the approved flowers for front yard planting. Each season had its own list, with a chart showing which colors were considered community appropriate. Despite how absurd it seemed, I decided to follow every guideline to the letter. My lawn was kept exactly 3.5 inches tall, never a millimeter more or less. My mailbox matched the approved design perfectly, even down to the exact shade of black matte paint. I painted my front door the Sandstone Whisper, the only acceptable shade of tan for corner lots with eastern exposure. My trash bins were always hidden from view except for the designated 12-hour window on collection day. I was determined to be the model Sunnyside resident. For 6 months, I managed to stay under Olivia's radar. I'd spot her driving through the neighborhood in her luxury SUV, clipboard in hand, issuing violation notices to other homeowners. But she'd always pass by my house without a second glance. There was a strange pride I felt in my compliance, even as I secretly rolled my eyes at the monthly newsletter listing things like unapproved wind chime audible from sidewalk or holiday decorations removed 2 days after grace period. The first real sign of trouble came when I decided to plant a row of privacy hedges along my side yard. The side of my corner lot faced a busy street, and I wanted some privacy from the noise and the eyes of passersby. The handbook was crystal clear about this on page 42, paragraph 6. Natural privacy barriers were allowed as long as they didn't exceed 6 feet in height and didn't block visibility at street corners. After doing thorough research, I chose emerald green arborvitae, an approved species listed in Appendix C of the handbook, and had them professionally installed, making sure they were precisely 5 feet 10 inches tall. I also made sure they were placed 15 feet from the corner, well beyond the required 10-foot setback for safety. I took detailed measurements and even snapped photos before and after the installation, just in case any questions came up. The landscaping company I hired was on the HOA's approved list, and they assured me everything was up to code. For 3 glorious weeks, my hedges were perfect, providing privacy, cutting down on road noise, and giving my property a sense of improvement while staying within the rules. Then, the day came that would spark the war. I got home from work one Tuesday afternoon to find Olivia standing in my front yard, flanked by two men wielding hedge trimmers. My beautiful arborvitae had been hacked down to a measly 3 feet tall. What was once a lush, green privacy barrier was now a sad row of stumpy shrubs that did nothing for my privacy or my property's curb appeal. I slammed my car door and stormed across the lawn, my blood boiling with each step. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" I demanded, struggling to keep my voice steady as rage bubbled inside me. Olivia turned with that all-too-familiar fake smile, adjusting her designer sunglasses. "Oh, Ethan, your hedges were in violation of code 4.7b, she said, as though it were no big deal. They were blocking the sight line at the corner. As president, I have the authority to take corrective action when homeowners don't comply after being notified." "Notification?" I asked, looking at the wreckage of my $2,000 investment. "I never got any notification about my hedges being out of line." She dismissed my concern with a wave of her hand, her diamond tennis bracelet sparkling in the sunlight. "It was emailed to all residents last week. The board voted and approved emergency action due to safety concerns." She pointed to a small orange flag at the corner of my property, a flag I was sure hadn't been there that morning. "This is a designated sightline protection zone. Perhaps you should read the handbook more carefully." I was furious, but I managed to keep my cool. After all, I'd spent nearly 2 decades managing high-pressure construction projects with tough clients and impossible deadlines. "Olivia, the HOA handbook is pretty clear on this. Section 2. Paragraph 3 states that any direct action by the board has to be preceded by a written notice delivered to the homeowner, with at least 5 days to comply. A general email about community issues doesn't count as an official violation notice." Her expression tightened, the first sign that her polished, authoritative demeanor was cracking. "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but what's done is done," she replied, voice dripping with insincere politeness. "The association will, of course, be billing you for the service, $375. With that, she handed some cash to the workers, thanked them, and strolled away, leaving me standing there, staring at the butchered remains of my hedges, seething with frustration. That night, I pored over the HOA handbook, determined to find a way to fight back. I couldn't wrap my head around how Olivia had the authority to just march onto my property and have my landscaping destroyed without giving me proper notice. There had to be something in this overly detailed rulebook that could work in my favor. And there it was, right in black and white. While natural privacy barriers had strict height limits, structural privacy features fell under a different set of guidelines. Specifically, perimeter walls made from approved materials could be built up to 6 feet tall, as long as they met county building codes and were approved by the Architectural Committee. The next morning, I put together a formal application for a 6-foot cinder block wall to replace my ruined hedges. I made sure to include professional blueprints, one of the perks of being an engineer, along with detailed material specifications and even computer-generated renderings, complete with the HOA-approved desert tone paint finish. According to the bylaws, the committee had 14 days to either approve or deny my request. If no response was given, the project would automatically be approved. 2 weeks passed without a word. I followed up with the HOA office twice, only to be told that the committee was still reviewing my application and would get back to me soon. Turns out Olivia, who also happened to chair the Architectural Committee, had simply forgotten to circulate my request. Her mistake. On the 15th day, I rented a small excavator and started digging the foundation trench for my new wall. I'd barely been working for an hour when Olivia's luxury SUV screeched to a halt in front of my house. She stormed across my yard in her designer heels, her face flushed red, arms flailing like an air traffic controller in crisis. "What do you think you're doing? You can't build a wall here. Stop this immediately, or I'll call the police." Her shrill voice carried across the neighborhood, drawing curious glances from the nearby houses. I calmly turned off the excavator, climbed down, and grabbed my clipboard. "Actually, Olivia, I said, keeping my tone even. "I submitted my application for this project exactly 15 days ago. According to Bylaw 7.3, Since the committee failed to respond within the required 14-day window, my application was automatically approved. I handed her a copy of my application, complete with the official date stamp and a certified mail receipt. Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she sputtered. This is outrageous. I never saw this application." I held up the certified mail receipt. "This says otherwise. It was delivered to the HOA office and signed for by you. Would you like to see the proof?" I kept my voice professional, but I couldn't stop the slight smirk forming on my face. I also have documentation showing my hedges were fully compliant before they were cut down without proper notice. Her face twisted through a range of emotions before settling on pure indignation. "Well, I'll be calling an emergency board meeting to address this loophole you're exploiting. This wall will not stand, and you'll be responsible for tearing it down and restoring the property to its previous state." "It's not a loophole, Olivia. It's the process laid out in the same handbook you gave me. But by all means, call whatever meeting you like. In the meantime, I'll keep working on my approved project." I climbed back into the excavator, started the engine, and went right back to work, effectively ending the conversation. Over the next week, I dedicated my time to constructing the wall, even taking some time off work to ensure it was done right. Neighbors stopped by out of curiosity, and as I explained what had happened, I realized I wasn't alone. Stories poured in, bird feeders ripped down, flower beds dug up for not being on the approved list, absurd fines for leaving trash cans out an hour too long. Olivia had been making life miserable for plenty of people. I was just the first to push back, effectively. True to her word, Olivia called an emergency board meeting, which I attended. After all, homeowners had a right to be there. The meeting took place in the community clubhouse, and to Olivia's dismay, it was packed. Word of our showdown had spread, and people were eager to see what would happen. Olivia tried to retroactively deny my application, claiming my wall was a safety hazard and didn't align with the neighborhood's aesthetic. But when I calmly cited the exact bylaws and provided proof of my proper submission, some of the board members started looking uneasy. Even the HOA's lawyer, whom Olivia had brought in to intimidate me, advised the board that my project had been lawfully approved according to their own regulations. The motion to reject my application failed. The only votes in favor were Olivia's and her closest ally on the board. She was furious. As the meeting adjourned, she cornered me by the door. "You may think you've won, but this isn't over. There are plenty of ways to enforce community standards." I met her glare with a steady look. "I'm just following the rules, Olivia. Maybe you should try it sometime." With that, I walked out. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my front door claiming my construction materials were improperly stored and that I had 24 hours to remove them or face a $50 per day fine. The handbook did state that materials couldn't be left in visible areas, but it also allowed an exception for active construction projects, with a 7-day grace period. It was clear Olivia wasn't backing down, but neither was I. I was still within the allowed time frame, but instead of getting into a dispute, I chose to handle the issue right away. I rented a storage pod, and by the end of the day, I'd moved all my materials into it, making sure it was set exactly 17 feet from the curb, a foot more than the required distance. The next morning, when Olivia came by, probably expecting to hand out a fine, there was nothing for her to find fault with. The disappointment on her face was worth every cent I spent on the storage pod. As I continued working on my wall, Olivia started stepping up her tactics. She went as far as reporting me to the county building inspector, accusing me of doing the construction without a permit. Luckily for me, I had all the permits squared away before I even began. Being in the construction business had its perks, like knowing exactly what paperwork was needed. The inspector came by, checked my documents, inspected the work, and even complimented me on the quality. "This is some of the finest residential masonry I've seen in years," he remarked as he signed off on the inspection. "Most homeowners try to cut corners, but you've gone above and beyond what the code requires." What Olivia didn't realize was that during the inspection, I casually mentioned a few things the HOA had done lately, including the fact that they chopped down my hedges without any proper notice. The inspector, who seemed to know Olivia and the Sunnyside HOA all too well, suggested I look into whether they had their paperwork in order for some recent improvements, like the fancy fountain Olivia had installed at the neighborhood entrance. "Funny you should bring that up," he said. "We've had complaints about that fountain, but every time we come to check, they tell us the permits are in process. This has been dragging on for months." After a quick search through the county records, I found out they hadn't just missed applying for permits, they hadn't even started the process. Olivia had pushed the project through as a community enhancement, spending nearly $30,000 of HOA money, but without following proper county rules. I filed a formal complaint with the county, and within days, the work on Olivia's beloved fountain came to a screeching halt with a stop work order and a $5,000 fine slapped on the HOA. But I didn't stop there. Olivia's vindictiveness lit a fire in me, fueling my determination to make her answer for the years of her neighborhood dictatorship. The more I dug, the more shady stuff I uncovered about how the HOA was run under Olivia's watch. I spoke to former board members who had quit after clashing with her, collected stories from neighbors who'd been unfairly targeted, and pored over meeting minutes and financial records that were supposed to be accessible to all of us homeowners, but were conveniently incomplete or missing. One especially interesting find came from Mrs. Lee, a retired accountant who lived 3 doors down from me. She'd been the treasurer before Olivia maneuvered her off the board 2 years back. Over tea in her spotless garden, Mrs. Lee shared her concerns about some funny business with the HOA's finances. "The numbers never added up," she confided. "Maintenance costs doubled after Olivia brought in her brother-in-law's landscaping company. When I asked for the invoices, they said it was confidential. That's not how HOA finances are supposed to work." As I wrapped up the final touches on my wall, a professional-grade cinder block structure with a textured face and a desert tin color that was fully compliant with all the rules, I also compiled a thorough dossier on Olivia's violations. It included everything from procedural missteps, selectively enforced rules, unannounced meetings, misuse of HOA funds, potential kickbacks from favored vendors, and a whole list of other infractions. I documented everything meticulously, creating a paper trail that couldn't be ignored. My wall was completed exactly 1 month after Olivia destroyed my hedges. It stood tall as a testament to following the rules while still making a point. It was perfectly up to code, professionally built, and much more imposing than the peaceful arborvitae that used to line my yard. I even added decorative planters at each end, filled with HOA-approved desert plants, a little extra touch that several of my neighbors complimented. Every time someone said something nice about it, it felt like another little victory. The wall was done just in time for the HOA's annual meeting, where they'd hold elections for the board and approve the budget for the upcoming year. I got there early, setting up a few boxes of documents in the middle of the community center. As people started to arrive, I handed each one a sealed envelope. Inside was a 15-page summary of Olivia's violations, along with an appendix of documentation, timestamps, and references to the specific bylaws she'd broken. The cover of the report had a simple question on it. "Is this the leadership you want for Sunnyside Estates?" By the time Olivia walked in, 15 minutes late and clearly rattled by the unusually large turnout, the room was buzzing. Normally, these meetings barely drew a handful of people. I'd heard that last year's meeting had just 12 residents show up besides the board. But tonight, nearly 100 people packed the room, all holding identical packets and whispering excitedly. Olivia paused briefly when she saw everyone reading my report, but she quickly pulled herself together and called the meeting to order. She shot me a nasty look as she took her place at the podium, but I just smiled and gave her a little wave. She barely made it through approving the previous meeting's minutes before Mrs. Lee, that same elderly accountant, stood up and made a motion. In a surprisingly strong voice, she said, "Before we move on with regular business, I'd like to propose an immediate vote of no confidence in President Bennett, based on the documented violations of HOA bylaws, potential financial misconduct, and abuse of power outlined in the report we've all received." A chorus of voices quickly seconded the motion. Olivia's face went pale as she realized what was happening. Her hands gripped the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. This is completely out of order. We have an agenda to follow, she sputtered. This so-called report is nothing more than a bunch of lies and twisted facts from a bitter homeowner who refuses to follow our rules. Her voice kept getting louder with each word, until it almost turned into a shriek that bounced off the walls of the suddenly quiet room. Actually, Mrs. Lee replied, calm as ever. The bylaws are quite clear. Article 4, Section 9 says a motion of no confidence takes priority over all other matters, as long as it's seconded by at least 10% of the members present. I believe we've hit that number. She adjusted her glasses and glanced around the room. On top of that, everything in this report is backed by solid evidence, including financial records, which, as a former treasurer, I can confirm show some major inconsistencies in how our funds have been managed. The vote that followed was almost unanimous. Out of the 97 homeowners there, 92 voted to remove Olivia as president. 3 abstained, and only 2, Olivia and her neighbor, opposed it. As the results were read, a small cheer rose from the back, quickly hushed, but it was clear how the community felt. Olivia stood there, gripping her gavel, powerless as her authority was stripped away in front of the very people she'd ruled over for years. "You can't do this," she whispered, but her mic was already cut off, and her words disappeared as the vice president took charge. "As per our bylaws, I will now step in as interim president until we can hold a special election," announced David Thompson, a retired principal who had always been uneasy with Olivia's iron-fisted style. "My first act will be to create a committee to audit the last 3 years of financial records. I'm also putting a hold on all violation notices until we can review them for proper procedure." As David asked Olivia to hand over the HOA records and office keys, I quietly gathered my things and made my way to the door. My part in this was over. I had no interest in joining the board or diving deeper into HOA politics. All I wanted was to live peacefully, enjoy my new wall, and maybe plant some vines to grow over it in the spring. Walking home in the cool evening air, I admired my wall from afar, solid, well-built, and fully compliant with the rules. Just as I reached my driveway, I heard quick footsteps behind me. I turned to see Olivia, her face twisted in anger, her usually perfect bob slightly mussed for the first time since I'd known her. You set this whole thing up? You did all of this just to humiliate me?" She jabbed a finger at my chest, stopping just shy of poking me. I sighed, feeling more drained than victorious. "No, Olivia, you set this in motion yourself. I just followed your rules. Every single one of them." I gestured toward my wall. "It's fully up to code." Her face twisted with rage as she realized she had no more leverage over me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll make sure you regret this. No one makes a fool out of me and gets away with it." "I think it's over, Olivia," came a voice from behind us. Mrs. Lee was there, along with David Thompson and another former board member. "We've already had a quick look at the financial records you left behind. Care to explain why $20,000 of association funds were transferred to your personal account last month, or why your brother-in-law's landscaping company has been paid nearly double the going rate for the past 3 years?" Olivia's face went from fury to shock in an instant. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd known her, Olivia Bennett was completely speechless. Thank you for watching. Hit subscribe.